The human brain is an interesting organ. On the one hand, it takes up about 20% of your oxygen that we breathe and 20% of your metabolic energy that we produce, while only making up roughly 2% of your total mass. Due to this complexity and trillions of connections that existed, a complex tapestry of consciousness appears to be created if it turns out that our brains are, just these and not conduits for some other form of invisible consciousness. But that's a whole different conversation, however. But what we do know for certain is that our brains pilot our meat suits like meat mechs, and as such, should a parasite gain control of the brain, they will have complete control of your body. But we have to ask, how realistic is that really? In the events of The Puppet Masters, an alien parasite would land on Earth and immediately begin stabbing spines and riding bodies to the prom. Well, not the literal prom, but the idea. As humanity became aware, a task force began actively engaging these creatures in an effort to stop them before they took over the whole planet. What's more alarming is that this is actually really not outside the realm of possibilities given how our bodies operate. So in today's episode, let's discuss the neurological feasibility of this, as well as how an alien even has 60% of its mass being neurons, given the aforementioned need for such nutrition to just fuel it. So you know the drill by now. Up on screen there will be a timestamp, or use the chapters bar to go to the science. Though I added science randomly throughout the summary too because, I don't know, I can't control myself. We kick off today's story on a farm as a youngling then rides his bike towards a grain silo, which you could 100% suffocate in. People toss a weird looking frisbee over a giant puddle because that seems like the most apropos area to do that, I guess. As they do, something appears in the sky and strikes the ground. Seeing that, they run towards it. Good plan. Another guy saw it as well as he gets in his truck, and welcome to Ambrose, Iowa, a decent enough town in the land of corn. Meeting the younglings, they have already found it as the guy gets a bat to his head, dropping his handheld and being knocked out. Alright, well, I guess the town could maybe use a bit more decency than they already have. Jumping over to the United States of America, which arguably we were just at, depending on who you ask. Nobody really knows if Iwoians. That doesn't sound right. Anyways, a helicopter lands so a guy can now get on a plane. Everyone then shakes hands as Nanomachine Sons comes out of the plane, as everyone then exchanges IDs. Getting in the car instead, they are headed to a decent enough town, as the man in the drinker's side is informed something entered the atmosphere last night. Locals are reporting a UFO has landed, and they are there to investigate the validity of those claims. The woman talks about xenobiology, except it's all just dead space.
Cheap CEC piece of shit.
Also, they call it exobiology. A bunch of dorks. Exobiology? Okay, never mind. So the man with the busted head from earlier is sending people in, as others who went off are just completely dazed. Approaching the ship covered in sheet metal, everyone who emerges from that thing ain't looking so hot. The xenobiologist, because I refuse to call her an exobiologist, climbs it, saying that she will go first. Also, if this is alien technology, this is hilariously busted looking. This is actually going to be funny later. So deciding not to enter the ship, if you can call it that, they leave out without their customary brain infection. The old man suggests something landed here, but that thing is not it. The xenobiologist suggests the boys didn't even try to look down her top. So there must be something wrong with them. Alright then, weirdo. Well, I mean, it's government agents, and if there's one thing I know about government agents, they are certifiably a bit strange. I'll never understand them. Also, you're not dumb. I'm only slightly dumb sometimes. These aliens built this busted-looking ship to confuse everyone because they thought we would all fall for it like idiots. Granted, a lot of people did fall for it like idiots, but you can kind of see these aliens really do not believe man is batting 1,000 down here. Meeting another man at the news station, he asks if they are implying his station tried to put a spin on the story. The media? Putting a spin on a story? That's just not possible. Not looking down Mrs. Allegedly Busty over here, I guess. It confirms everything they need to know, as something must be wrong with him. Because of this transgression, he's taken out by the bodyguard immediately. Now, that escalated really fast. As something moves on his back, a creature then emerges as it drags itself towards the water before going full on a potato flew around my room. They then burn it and then take the body with them as they attempt to leave the station. However, given that they just shot Jeff for being a decent enough person and not looking down a xenobiologist's top, they all start getting attacked by decent enough people. Basically at this point, most of the town is infected. It now becomes just a run and gun, as there are at least 320 people out there riding or dying for what is riding them. Tragic. Granted, human behavior is not so different from this alien influence, if you catch my meaning. If you don't, then go ask your parents. Leaving the town, we then jump back over to the plane as the old man calls in, telling someone they need to quarantine the whole town and put up roadblocks. The xenobiologist says first contact wasn't supposed to happen like this. No, really, I mean, who knows how it all truly go down, but also, this is a perfect time to bring up what in the name of all that is holy is that thing headed towards Earth in real life. I mean, we've all seen that ridiculous title on Facebook at this point, only a 0.05% chance that it's natural. Brother, do not forget what is going on with the nonsense at the top. The rock entering our solar system is probably just a rock, but you being distracted is much more important. His name starts with E. Anyhow, the case now starts moving as E.T. wants to get out of it. But no thanks. Bringing the creature to an autopsy table, well, I guess that sucks for that thing. They have no body heat, no electrical movement, nothing. They start throwing around words like theory and politics, you know how it goes, but its body seems fairly inert, which actually, when we move into the xenobiology of this thing, this will be a topic of discussion given that this is a survival mechanism. So while that's happening, a team has been dispatched to check on the ship to determine what was actually in there. The reality is an algae goo pile. Getting back to the government facility, they report whatever was in the pit has clearly been moved. It is assumed roughly about 320 people may have been infected at this point, which we all know, and the creature has 60% of its body weight actually composing of brain tissue, or being composed of brain tissue, which you and I both know. But again, I wasn't supposed to tell you that part yet. The probes penetrate the brain, and then the slugs use you like a puppet. So really they become the puppet masters. The organism has no sensory organs, and instead it uses the host entirely for its own gain. It basically becomes a super brain, and your brain is relegated to a spinal cord activity. Man, what a downgrade. As bodyguard extraordinaire sits here, he then asks Jarvis when he stops smoking as another fight breaks out because he's infected. Now before moving on, because I do like to have science in this stuff still, there's a misnomer about the spinal cord that's actually just used for communication, which is fairly untrue. You can kind of think of the spinal cord actually as a sort of primitive brain. Way back in the day when chordates were formed, there was actually a little nodule at the top which would eventually become the big brainy brains that we have today, but the reality is there was an equal amount, if not more, nervous tissue within the spinal cord itself of chordates. So you have to ask yourself, was it really all just used for communication like the white matter in the brain? No. All right, let's get into it. Don't do this. I'm telling you not to do this. If you do this, it's your fault. Go touch a stove, but don't actually do it. This is kind of a thought experiment. We're thinking about this because we've all touched something hot back in the day. Like, have you ever wondered why you can pull your hand back before you even feel the pain? Or have you ever slammed your hand in a car door? I have. And tried to pull it back, but you realized you were stuck, which is horrifying. That is actually your spinal cord making a decision for you on how to move your body. As the massive jolt of pain is detected, your sensory neurons scream to the spinal cord, hey bro, we're straight up not having a good time. The issue is, while nerve signals in the body can move at an impressive speed, which is not impressive, of 1.1 miles per hour, the impressive one is actually 268 miles per hour, which is quite the span, but the reasoning is your body needs nerves to do different thing. The pain nerves travel quite quickly, but while communication is happening, tissue is being destroyed, or at least that's what your body thinks. Slamming your hand into the car door, it's not like it's being destroyed, but it's incredibly painful. Burning? It's being destroyed. So the body really doesn't have time for the brain to interpret the pain signal and then formulate a response, so it enters in what is known as the spinal arc. The information reaches the spinal cord and is such a massive issue, your spine immediately forms a response, which is, hey dude, pull your hand away. This is why when you slam your finger in the car door, you immediately try to rip away because your spinal cord is limited on the knowledge that it has. Next, your brain realizes what's happening, which is now you realize, oh, I need to open the car door first. That is a higher thought process, taking a little longer. Now imagine if you grab something like a hot rock from a fire because you're just that guy, and then it took that long to let go. You would lose your hand as the head takes too long to respond, because even in fractions of a second, that's going to destroy tissue through heat conduction. It's an amazing response, really, and it highlights that the typical thinking of the spinal cord of it just being a bridge is incorrect. And actually, we like to think that we're the only ones thinking with our brains, but really, we also think with our spinal cords as well, at least to a degree. So making a run for it, he goes upstairs as he kicks bodyguard down the stairs. And have you ever been kicked downstairs before? It hurts. Meeting up with the other pursuing group, they check the halls and then find Jarvis face down in the bathroom with a creature having left his body. Having lost the alien, they all now take off their shirts to clear themselves of suspicion. Wow, just the bodyguard at first so you can see his abs, and later, he doesn't even bother to button up his shirt again so you can see his abs. Trying to get swole like this. Everyone then starts dressing down to prove that they haven't been taken over. However, during that, another woman refuses and then she runs off. Bodyguard gets hit in the head and thrown around like a baby in a dryer by her at this point, and she's going absolutely ham on this dude. Now you may be wondering, with your pretty striped head. That's a full-grown dude who looks relatively swole. Why is he getting his tail absolutely whooped? Well, the human body is an interesting piece of machinery. For instance, currently, due to recent events outside of my control, my endocrine system is dumping cortisol and adrenaline on a fairly consistent basis, making my fight or flight run in the background and preventing me from sleeping well at all. This same system impacts our body's ability to do many things, but mostly it's because of perceived threat to survival. At the end of the day, despite man's climb up the technological scale, we are still cavemen and women at heart, cave women, and more specifically in our brains. When people are lost, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, our brains perceive this as a change in a bad way. And this must mean there is something in the environment that is picking people off, and so it responds in kind by dumping epinephrine and norepinephrine. The little gland located directly above the kidneys accomplishes this by putting these hormones into your bloodstream. This will vasoconstrict the blood vessels around your organs and put most of that blood into your muscular system and into your brain. This has the unfortunate effect of making you queasy because now your intestines are not working as well because they have less blood, but this also does other things, several things actually. First, this will allow for your muscles to contract with more force than normal because they will have more access to oxygen. Along with this, your brain will actually begin making decisions faster, and this is known as a time dilation effect. It's interesting because people will perceive things in slow motion at this point, allowing for the perception that they have more time to make decisions, but really they're making faster decisions even with time progressing as normal. But how, I can hear you asking? Well, think of your eyes as operating at like 30 frames per second. That is the standard. And while that's not an exact situation, as your eyes don't really see in frames, this is about the average point of perception. It offers a balance of you being able to see things with stability concerning nutrients usage. So everything it's basically a finely tuned balance. When adrenaline is dumped, this shoots up the hypothesized 30 frames per second to around 50 to 75 frames per second as your neurons begin firing more rapidly, which, as you have guessed, is going to use more energy, but this is what produces the time dilation effect. Along with this perception, limiting protective factors imposed by the brain are removed from your muscle contractions. We know the song and dance here, but if you don't, humans use only about 30% to roughly half of our strength. You can actually train to get that strength to around like 60 to 70% for strongmen, but you never actually unlock hysterical strength. Hysterical strength is a thing just all of its own, and this is when it's flat out kill or be killed, or at least your body thinks that. Your body will dump everything it has to stay alive, even tearing muscle away from bone in order to keep you functional. And this is what the alien is doing to the human body. Everyone who gets controlled has a parasite take over this function and actively directs strength. And this would wear out the body faster as damage builds up, but it also has another effect which we will see here momentarily. The takeaway is that it's entirely possible for a regular woman to absolutely dog walk you if she's operating on hysterical strength and he's not. However, tasers are undefeated in the parking lot 99.99% of the time. Eventually, he's able to subdue her, but the creature allegedly runs off once more into the vents, and I do know how to say allegedly. I'm not really sure why I pronounced it that way. Interestingly though, Jarvis has survived, but now he's having extreme withdrawal symptoms as a result, and this would imply several things about this parasitic infection. It isn't just adrenaline being dumped, but it's very clear dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, they're all being released in increased amounts. The endocrine system appears heavily affected by the presence of this parasite, and this could be for a multitude of reasons, but the main one appears to be that this actually could increase reactivity of the neurons in the brain, but also creating a bonding effect. That's right, this thing wants to bond with you, Jimmy, specifically with oxytocin released by the parasite itself. And this may prevent the brain from actively wanting to resist the parasite's influence, and instead causes the person to become subdued as their brain is flooded with feel-good chemicals. It's actually quite brilliant, as this would also disrupt the level of disgust that you should have for something reaching into your skull that looks like a slug. The areas most likely affected are going to be the limbic system, pituitary gland, and the more baser areas of the brain, such as the pons, midbrain, and medulla, it's a pretty clever alien. Burn its mongrel hide. Doing more tests, growths are actually found on the alien as they transmit something to the brain. Jarvis at this point injects straight air into his veins, causing a pulmonary embolism, likely, which is not an ideal situation. That's basically when you get air in your pulmonary vein or artery. It's not good. Your heart basically gives up at that point. So why exactly did he do this? Withdrawal from natural substances in the brain is no joke. Think of like a breakup or some major loss, for instance. While in hindsight, it might seem silly as you felt what you felt. there are actually very real chemical withdrawals in your brain due to the absence of that person. We will see the effects more clearly here on someone who doesn't have access to a bag of air, but this withdrawal, as the receptors need time to be broken down, means that the brain is not communicating correctly, leading to a state of severe depression and a profound sense of loss after the alien has left your body. As a result, only one option seems viable, or if people are left to their own devices, and it also probably depends on their mental state as well. This further shows that the endocrine system is heavily impacted by the presence and subsequent disappearance of this xeno threat. So Bodyguard now heads over to find another guy's, he just goes to his place to search Jarvis's apartment. Finding eggs in the apartment, turns out Bodyguard extraordinaire here was in fact infected, and he infects the apartment manager. I like how everyone just assumed he was good to go because he's like, oh, the vent in the kitchen's broken. That's where it went. Hey, bro, take off your shirt real quick. I'd like to institute a no shirts policy. The skins versus the aliens. It's weird, but it's better than being taken over by a bunch of aliens. So as they talk to one another, heading back into a sketch government facility, the president is coming there to discuss something as they grab the guard and then take over his brain next. Later, as everyone badges in, the president is on his way. With his security detail securing the area, they begin moving in as Anti-Alien Team 1 are also making money moves on the building. Spotting Bodyguard extraordinaire, I don't know why I put that. Everything is locked down as Anti-Alien Team 1 saves the president. Bodyguard then makes a jump for it as they trank him a few times as he's knocked unconscious. Bringing him back to Team Human, they see his nervous system is actually linked together with the alien. The parasite is releasing a frequency that is too high for humans to hear, but this is how they communicate amongst each other. One of the things is the reason they have no sensory organs is because they communicate by frequencies with each other, and this would imply that the electromagnetism of that amount of neural tissue that they actually have is how they sense, I guess, their environment. Anyhow, the old man enters the sterile chamber as they wake up Bodyguard extraordinaire. The aliens begin talking to him, or at least the alien begins talking to him, as he flatlines the Bodyguard for a moment to show he can just completely stop his heart. Shocking the creature, they ask again why he's there. The creature says there is just one of them, not many. Ah yes, the collective hive mind. This means that the neurons possessed by each individual alien would likely be no different than like your arm possessing neurons and your brain still controlling it. And this indicates they communicate and bridge the gap between individuals by other means, which we will see here momentarily. But part of that localized, like you have local effect, a larger effect, and then like a super intimate effect. The larger effect is going to be collectively all of them around each other. They're going to be able to communicate, right? Over vaster distances by using each other as like jumping points because they're close enough, right? Then you have the local effect, which is them right next to each other, which is much closer, still kind of like the larger effect. But then you have the more intimate effect where they touch each other and it's gross. Psychoanalyzing the old man, okay, their alien armchair therapist, it takes him out again as it shocks it to virtual death, or they shock it to virtual death, and it retreats off of him and out of his brain. Bodyguard extraordinaire then wakes up from the nightmare of having your meat suit ridden. In some ways it's great. In this way though, not great. He was aware and conscious, like a sleep paralysis dream, and this would likely involve the release of GABA and glycine on the brainstem, which paralyzes the body so that the brain cannot act out what it is dreaming, or in this case, he just couldn't move at all. Anyhow, this thing knows everything he knows now. I want it off my planet. The ship isn't actually a ship, it's more like a nerve center for these things. Back out in an allegedly decent town, this whole place is basically taken over by now. As they head out to the surrounding areas, they place the alien eggs in people's mailboxes to continue on the infection. There's a breakthrough, however, that gives man the edge. Given the alien's ability to essentially ramp up the metabolism of man in order to fuel this new hysterical strength, they are just going to naturally operate with a higher amount of body heat because they are essentially having their metabolisms run higher, which is still making them sweaty as they have autonomic functions, which the parasite isn't really worried about. But at the hospital, xenobiologist gets to watch Bodyguard extraordinaire going through it in the shower. Yeah, I think after that experience, you may have some problems, to be honest with you. So they awkwardly make out. This level of withdrawal is actually fairly profound, and it probably feels like you're dying internally until the receptors of the brain return back to normal. Because of the absolute flooding of the brain, you kind of have a two-pronged issue. First, again, you have more receptors. In order to deal with the flood of neurochemicals in your brain compensates for this by producing more receptors for neurochemicals in an effort to make sure that it takes more to operate the neuron in order to just not constantly be fired. And this is why if you get addicted to like drugs or something, you have to continue to take more and more because your brain is compensating. This also in turn leads to the second issue, depletion. You are made of meat and not a continual wealth of neurotransmitters. The longer your meat suit is ridden, the more depleted you become. Once the alien is gone, who may have also been sharing these neurotransmitters, which we'll kind of talk about that, to avoid the depletion phase, this would also cause your brain to absolutely riot. Too many receptors, not enough neurotransmitters, even just for normal communication, which means communication would be disrupted routinely, and you would be out of your mind until that stabilizes again. This can arguably realistically take months after the initial wear off, so really, you just gotta sit there and thug it out. Don't we all? Back over at the Situation Room, their plan is to bring in the military at night and retake the town nice and quiet. With hundreds of eggs laid, this has got to be like an homage to Alien, I think. As some soldiers get picked up, you think they would have been given some sort of neck armor or something, just a metal plate? I guess not. So as it's all women and children first because the aliens suck, the soldiers start getting ganked because they really don't want to take pot shots at the younglings and the women. I get it. Some soldiers return who are definitely infected, and the general gets called into an office where he becomes infected next. Again, this was a great idea if you actually supplied the soldiers with knowledge of what they were dealing with and neck protection. Back in the lab, the aliens infected apes as they start communicating via chemical signatures and frequencies, but mostly they just start feeling each other's tendrils. Gross. I guess direct contact, it probably is faster. So it would be like the frequency is how they sense each other to see if you're infected, whereas the direct contact is where they can share memories. So as one parasite breaks off, the third is then infected. Well, the third monkey. They reproduce rather quickly, and the alien then uses the monkey to communicate with bodyguard extraordinaire, asking if he misses him. Ah, yes. Like an ex-girlfriend texting you at 3 a.m. That's pretty much how it goes. Brain-controlling slug, though. Probably don't miss that one. Except for, the whole oxytocin bonding thing. I mean, it's a real thing. So as the general then takes off his shirt to turn around, the signal cuts off. The entire operation over there has been compromised. These creatures can transmit not just intelligence, but also memory. At the current rate of reproduction, it is hypothesized that in 2 weeks, there should be around 250 billion of these things. Bodyguard then makes a pass at xenobiologist as apartment manager watches from afar, which is probably standard. Building a fire, they sit and talk about his dead mom and working. What a pickup line. Making another pass because we already had the shower scene, Bodyguard then gets a page, which is super retro, as he uses his 90s phone to call. Heading back to the living room, they are being called back, but they have 10 minutes. That's generous. Also, predictably, she's being controlled by a slug. Who would have I would have predicted this. Killing the alien, she then squares up with him, and jumping from the window, apartment manager takes some pot shots as then she gets in and they take off. Record time on losing a girlfriend there, brother. Well done. So at this point, chaos is beginning to spread as the aliens also are spreading. The idea of the hive comes up once more. Seeing the hive has now moved into Des Moines, or as I like to call it, Des Moines, they need to head back to Iowa as now they realize they need to make money moves tonight. Otherwise, this thing is going to spread out of control and they will lose basically an understanding of where the hive likely is. So as they go and get ready to load up, the scientist from earlier gives them a cloaker that will emit the same frequency so that they don't know they aren't infected. As xenobiologist enters a room, everyone weirdly stares at her as not two parachutes, but two people. Bodyguard extraordinaire, and this guy has shown up a few times. Yeah. Anyways, they parachute in. I think he's been in like 4 meetings. I didn't realize he was a badass like this. So as one woman then goes and looks for someone named Danny, she is surrounded as then she is then infected because she walked outside screaming, "Danny!" Oh, that voice crack is bad. Turning around, a soldier wants to merge as in they knock out the soldier because he doesn't want to merge with that. The president has instituted martial law at this point as charges are set around City Hall. Heading to the parking garage, everyone there is entering a weird green opening. Don't think too much about that as it's disturbingly closing after the bodyguard makes the scene. Ugh. Heading down into a cave system of sorts, everyone is communicating with the large slug in the sky as others are just kind of laying on the ground. Everyone is landlined in like a Halo LAN party. Better days, man. As guard extraordinaire walks in, he spots xenobiologist as he pretends to be with everyone else. Throwing a grenade, he shocks the xenobiologist as he grabs her to bring her out. The slug at this point tries to escape as he rips it off and then fires a shot into it. Coming back to, they now take off out of there as she's dealing with the same withdrawal symptoms. Next, Prometheus goes to enter the area even though he was told just blow the place if I don't make it out. Xeno now pulls Bodyguard into, the back area as humans are being studied by the parasite as well. His body, well, specifically this guy, this kid, I guess, his body was able to get rid of the parasite, and the parasite wants to know how, because it appears as though he contracted something that was fatal to his own infection. Also, I don't know what's with the scopes on these force multipliers, but it is hilarious. What is the point of them also if you're just gonna hip fire the whole time? So in the battle, part of Dream Team falls in the water as he is swarmed by the slugs. Detonating the charges upstairs, they then move into the back, as apparently shoving people completely solves the slug problem because they're very unbalanced. Locking up the door, they continue their retreat as the second member of the dynamic duo arrives. Tracking him via the frequency tracker, Bodyguard does a triple sow cow jump kick, flying down onto him and knocking him down, as this causes the slug to start absolutely losing it, and then it just sort of gains control, but not really. I guess the shock to the nervous system probably shocked it. In the ensuing fight, it now becomes straight up CQC as Zeno then shoots a bunch, hitting a few of the slugs. Getting out on the roof, they then open up on everyone who happens to be coming through that door, as then they take off. So evidently this youngling had his infection in his brain, resulting in encephalitis. It was spread by mosquitoes, and as long as they treat it in a few days, humans can be cured, whereas aliens, being 60% brain matter, will perish long before man does. So dropping the mosquitoes in the area, and I should cover that movie at some point, everyone is infected and the aliens all fall off after exploding. Now, all we have to do is treat the encephalitis on a mass scale before this thing gets out of control, and surely this won't be an issue at all. So as they move into the hive area looking for aliens, everyone descends into the weird once green opening thing down in the parking garage. It has all calcified, it appears, or at minimum, it's just desiccated. As the old man goes to look directly under the brain drain above him, it being a mass of neural tissue, it has dustified, I guess is the best way to put it. Saying he's seen enough, he bails out, as the aliens in the water are all dead as well. Alright, he's totally infected. We know that, right? Let's be, oh, and you know what? As he goes outside, it was the first time I watched it, I called it. Jacking the helicopter, Bodyguard then jumps on it, attempting to pull himself up. They give chase in vehicles, but keeping up with a helicopter might be kind of difficult. The parasite explains how it learns from their mistakes, and approaching Bodyguard, the question is posed: could you kill your own father? Taking the controls, the handheld is basically lost at this point, as it becomes out fist fighting your dad. Ah, Thanksgiving. It's always a great time at the Roanoke household. That was a pure joke, by the way. My dad's cool as hell. I love my dad. Shocking the alien, he knocks out his dad and then leaves him, and then, I guess, gets smashed on the helicopter rotors. I don't know how that happened. Landing the helicopter, he then pulls his old man out as he carries him off, yelling, "Dad, wake up. He's awake, but you just shot your dad." That was allegedly the last one, according to Pops here, and he knows it's because he was connected to it, so there's no more. So Zeno now knows apparently all of Bodyguard's thoughts and feelings because, you know, they were in each other's head technically. So they walk off, and thus concludes the Puppet Masters. So I want to cover a few things here. First, evolutionary biology of these things, how they became what they are, and actually before moving on to the interactions with the human brain. What I find most strange about these aspects overall is how these creatures react to encephalitis, but we will get there as well because the fools totally did it to themselves. You buffoons. Quite literally, these things are the nerds of the cosmos. How could you have not seen this coming? You're supposed to be smart, right? Do you not have germ theory on your planet? So first and foremost, I believe this to be mostly aquatic species for several reasons. As we take a look at their overall physiology, they appear very much like the stingrays of Earth, and this sort of hydrodynamic design would indicate that they were moving through areas which were going to be moisture-based rather than air. I think one of the giveaways was actually when one was trying to make a break for it out of the station and it attached itself to a water cooler. I believe it was looking for escape to water where it wouldn't have to pull itself around and could just swim away. This also mostly is confirmed by the pool of water in the ship that was built to house the eggs that others could be infected. That was such a stupid looking ship. That was sheet metal. You know what? These parasites are kind of jerks. We're not that stupid. So another thing to note about their speculative, because apparently people have said in the past that it's like, well, how do you know that? No, like, dude, it's speculative. We're just having, it's a YouTube video. We're having fun. You're supposed to be having fun. Anyways, it's speculative evolutionary biology is that these creatures appear to not only have existed in water, but the planet itself must have been warm enough in order to have liquid water at the surface of their world. They were not deep down in the depths and they're like a layer of ice, basically. Instead, due to their chlorophyll derivative that appears to kind of power their body, this would mean that they get their nutrition from the sun that their original planet orbits. Given the amount of tissue that they are made up of a nervous system, it's also important that they stay in the sun, essentially because if they don't, then how are they supposed to power their brains? They do have a survival mechanism where they can shut down their body in order to preserve energy when they're in a carrying case, I guess is the best way to put it. But just know that's how they fuel their bodies until they attach. But the question presents itself. If this species has the ability to actually survive off the sun, why would they need to develop parasitic tendencies that wholly take over the host? Getting a good look at these creatures, a few things becomes rather apparent. First, they're xenoscum. Second, they're an aquatic-based organism that can survive outside of the water for an extended period of time, perhaps indefinitely, but they appear to have to be attached to a host to do this. And third, they are intelligent enough to know the frailty of their own bodies. They are disgusted by their flesh, aren't we all? Get in line. So what mechanisms would be at play to push these creatures into what they actually are capable of? To me, this seems like a fairly clear line of parasitism that engages with one on their own world. They do this. But it's parasitism by our standards, and we'll talk about that here in a second. These creatures would clearly have vertebrates who developed brains on their home planet, in which they end up attaching to. This attachment might not be as parasitic as it is on Earth, however. On our world, humans are completely autonomous individuals, and as a result of that, if anything takes away that ability, it is seen as a clear parasite. However, if the situation actually brings about what could be considered more fitness concerning a specific environment, then that would actually shift the idea more in line with a mutually beneficial situation or a symbiotic relationship. Now you may be saying, Roanoke, you're being pretty pro-alien parasite right now. What you got going on at home? Not a whole lot, don't worry about it. Let's get into symbiotic relationships. This creature, to develop into what it is, could very well have a symbiotic relationship with another organism that lives on land. It is very likely to be a quadrupedal animal and have a spinal column, probably where, the quadrupeds on Earth have, and it would have a brain with, a similar, location is the best way to put it. However, this brain may not be as developed, but also why quadrupedal? Because of its ability to make energy from the sun, it would have to be in an area where it can receive the sunlight. It also probably pulls nutrition from the host itself. This hypothesized animal may be somewhat exposed on its own, but once being infected with this creature, its decision-making skills would improve and it would survive in its environment at least somewhat better. This level of specialization that these slugs possess seems to be way outside of the norm. If you take humans, for instance, we are technically the freaks of the animal kingdom. Typically, an animal will be built for its environment because it's molded by that environment. And while physically our bodies can handle many different environments and we're not profoundly crazy except for our persistence hunting, it's our brains that actually make zero sense. We are way more intelligent than we need to be to survive, orders of magnitude higher. We exist autonomously from one another to a degree, barring social interactions being necessary to maintain good brain health. And these creatures are also specialized in a way that is way overbuilt for their environment, but their bodies are actually even more susceptible than ours would be. The brain slugs do not appear to possess any sort of sensory gland, apart from just in general, a feeling of the environment to grasp things and the frequency emitted so that they can read each other. Even then, it's just they're just basically nervous. They're a mobile brain. They cannot hear, smell, taste, or see, and this means the environment they are built for is predicated on being attached to something else, given that they're mostly, again, just brain matter with a thin covering of tissue. This is why I believe a specific brain slug quadrupedal animal interaction must exist. They essentially become the brains of these hypothesized creatures, which gives us clues as to how they're interacting with the human mind as well, but also why this would be their downfall. In order to interact with life, you need to protect yourself from life. Even during the process of human reproduction, the reason it's called the miracle of life is because the female immune system goes absolutely ham on sperm cells, and that's even with the body knowing reproduction is trying to happen, which subdues the immune system at least to a degree. The point is, trans-species interactions are going to be massively difficult, and the human immune systems, or the immune systems of any animal, will eventually get involved in one way or another, which is bad for the brain slug, as this could end up taking out the host, which is not something they want. So how do they overcome this issue? The brain slug has a fairly interesting adaptation, which also leads to its downfall. Upon coming into contact with the host, they will immediately insert into the nervous system tissue, around the spine, following it past the brainstem and into the parietal region of the skull. This is for several reasons. First, the brainstem, as mentioned, or for some reason as I type this, I keep calling it, I've covered neurology on this channel for 7 years. I keep calling it the Brian stem. I have no idea why I keep typing that one out. first. Like, I actively say, I feel like I'm writing brainstem, but it's always brainstem. Anyways, this can immobilize the body if GABA and glycine are released. This will bind to the motor neurons in the spinal cord, preventing muscle movement from taking place. Along with this, given the proximity in the head, the occipital lobe is impacted, so this creature can functionally read what is being detected by human eyes. The tentacles will then reach the parietal lobe as well, where the primary motor cortex of the body is located. Given all these areas being taken over at once, also the cerebellum is it's right there too, so the cerebellum's being impacted. Don't you worry, I didn't forget about the cerebellum. So given all these areas being taken over at once, this says to me a few things because I'm not biased at all towards my own thinking and ideas that I write down here. Don't ask questions. This further supports the idea of possibly a symbiotic relationship with another creature. It provides the sensory information that this creature needs, I guess, and the creature provides a brain. You may wonder how I know it has sensory information given the hypothesized animal. Well, given that there is a sun and light, it's highly likely eyes, ears, smell, touch, taste, all developed in these aliens elsewhere given similar parameters of Earth and complex organisms that formed. Anyhow, back to the human brain because that's the one we care about. So we all know it's going after all these areas of the brain associated with movement, and we discussed the mass expulsion of neurotransmitters. The question now becomes, how does it accomplish staying there without tripping the human immune system and also being able to exist within our atmosphere? As we all know, when this creature comes into contact with us, it appears very likely it's just going to, by natural ability, destroy some human cells in the process, but this is not a glitch, it's a feature. It needs to do this. And this is pretty easy, as you know, it could be just blood or a few nerves that get in the way, skin cells. Ultimately, there's information that it needs. Upon destroying the cell, it takes a piece of that genetic coding, a very specific piece, that allows for it to present as a human cell, known as the human leukocyte antigen gene clusters, or HLAs. This is responsible for creating a peptide on the outside of the cell, known as a major histocompatibility complex, or MHC. This is how the immune system figures out if the cell that is there is actually supposed to be there because it's identifying as self. Even in immune privileged sites, such as the brain, if the immune system were to come across another nervous system tissue cell that did not display this, it would lead to something known as meningitis in humans, which is where the meninges swell and that surrounds the brain, which will put pressure on the brain itself, which will kill them. If you need any type of existential dread, which I just am operating on right now, basically, if your brain for some reason decided to just screw up the MHC complexes, you're gonna die. Straight up, dude. Life is very delicate. Anyway, so this is typically what gets you if you get something like a brain-eating amoeba. The brain slug would need to incorporate these sets of genes in order to display this peptide correctly. However, I doubt it stops there. How would this creature know exactly where to stop? If you ask that question, you're absolutely right. It wouldn't know. It doesn't know the human genome. It doesn't necessarily know what it's looking for either. Instead, I believe it incorporates quite a bit of the human genome, possibly in a plasmid-like structure. What are plasmids? Essentially, these are the circular sets of DNA that prokaryotes can actually pass back and forth through conjugation to give them things like antibiotic resistance or make themselves more fit to the environment. By incorporating the human genome in this way, their own genetic sequences are not contaminated, but information could be accessed should they need to build a peptide or possibly alter their metabolism in a way that would allow, I guess, them to breathe our oxygen, to exist in this environment, pretty much everything. Or maybe the actual production of neurotransmitters to flood the brain so that they can interact with the host nervous system on a better level. Ultimately, the biggest reason is the immune system doesn't attack the alien tendrils, so they must be presenting as human. And the fact that it doesn't inspire any inflammation also says the aliens are presenting as human. However, it's kind of a double-edged sword. By incorporating this genome, you are now susceptible to human infections due to the same presentation of receptors on the surface. Basically, everyone's favorite jerk viruses. As encephalitis was found, which is an actual inflammation of the brain tissue itself, leading to swelling and internal pressures to rise, this is fatal to both humans and these aliens in different timelines. A human, given only 2% of our body mass is neural tissue, and there is at least some space between the brain and the skull, mild swelling will not kill us. But you'll still probably have to treat it. It can become an issue if it's left untreated or the swelling gets out of control. However, with this creature, given 60% of its body mass is neural tissue, swelling not only immobilizes it entirely, but you gotta think of it as like, instead of just, my head hurts because my brain's swelling, it's like anaphylactic shock. It's a massive allergic reaction, and allergic reactions, as we all know, can kill humans inside of 5 minutes. The same for these creatures as they experience swelling on an uncontrollable scale. And this is all due to the fact that when they begin attempting to present as a human cell, all the receptors would match up and they would appear as though they were supposed to be there, except they couldn't know one thing. It's an absolute war down here on Earth with how many microbes at any given point are trying to take over your body. So while we suffer from diseases, if something wants to take on the facade of a human cell, they will also experience that issue as well. As the virus entered the alien cells, it would find the human genome, given the aliens are pretending to be a human nerve cell, but it would engage, the alien cell would engage naturally because of what's just standardly going to happen. Really, its whole body would begin releasing fluid, and this would leak into the surrounding environment within its body, choking out the neurons and ultimately killing the brain slug by basically popping it. And that's what you get for pretending to be a human, you friggin' nerd. Ultimately, I believe, given this species' ability to attach to others, there are likely other species on its world in which it evolved that may have actually been more symbiotic. And given that they hailed from this planet, they would probably have much more of an ability to actually deal with the naturally occurring microbes of that world and the subsequent immune system reactions. And this would keep them alive, but with other worlds, such as ours, different rules apply. Our own infections down here can result in the death of us, but with medication, we can delay that from happening or possibly even outright fix it. Given the disproportional amount of nervous tissues within this alien, this becomes more of an issue for them as they have a stronger response, leading them to absolutely flatline out. But I want to hear what you guys think. Would it really be so easy to take this alien out? Let me know down in the comments. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, and channel links in the description. I'm thinking about live streaming here for members, but playing video games. I tried that with movies one time. Doesn't work. Anyways, we'll get there at some point. But speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. At the astronaut tier, we have Bananas Are Epic. Thank you, my man. Next up, the astrophysicist tier, we have Death Dancer. Thank you as well, bro. And at the scientist tier, we have Dakota23, Frank Shaftcrank. I actually love electric cars and the anglerfish, which, as always, is a lie. Invictus Echo, Metric System, Official Texan, and Stutz. And the rest of my patrons, I do appreciate y'all's support. The channel cannot run functionally without it, and you are absolute ballers. All right, that's going to do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and we'll see y'all in the next one.